And Alina, it's the start of a 2-month session. Lawmakers have a lot of ground to cover in a short amount of time, but they kicked that off today on a closing note.
That's right, Brooke. As lawmakers gavelled in for day one of session, Governor John Bel Edwards delivered his final State of the State address, and central to his message to lawmakers, bipartisanship and making sure to leave Louisiana in a better place than they found it.
Promises were made, promises were kept, and progress has been delivered.
Governor John Bel Edwards in his final State of the State address, marking the work of not only his administration, but that alongside a bipartisan legislature, from Medicaid expansion to billions in infrastructure investments.
So much of what he did today was what has happened in the past, because he does work on a bipartisan effort with a lot of different legislators.
While this is my final year, my second term as governor of the great state of Louisiana, our work is far from over.
That work outlined in his legislative agenda for this fiscal session, where he is again urging lawmakers to fund investments in education, like teacher pay raises, insurance reform, climate initiatives, and workforce development. In announcing support for legislation, he pointed to State Representative Ed Laverdane's bill to increase the state's minimum wage.
Understand, people will only go back to work if the minimum wage is lifted and it's a decent salary.
But like minimum wage legislation, lawmakers will have to debate how to balance the budget and whether the state can afford to make those investments.
We are running surpluses and excesses actually in revenue, and how we manage that in the here and now and moving forward is going to be really important.
But it wasn't just fiscal legislation Edwards highlighted. He announced support for efforts that have long been met with pushback from some lawmakers, supporting abortion exceptions for rape and incest and eliminating the death penalty. For both looking to his faith and the idea of servanthood, and leaving lawmakers with a push to do the same.
Let's put our brothers and sisters above ourselves. Let's look out for those who are less fortunate. Let's turn words into action. Serving this state that I so dearly love, has been the honor of a lifetime. And with all my heart, thank you, Louisiana. And may God bless you all. And may God bless the great state of Louisiana.